Sorry for the wait. Give me 1 second. Let me just double check. Chairman Chandler, we're live.
Can you all hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, everybody. This is Ben Chandler. I am the chair of the Kentucky State Board of Elections. I want to welcome everybody to the July 13th special meeting of the State Board of Election. This will be our first meeting after the primary election. And first, I'd like to call roll of the members. And I will, let's see, I'll start with Corey Skolnick.
Corey Skolnick, member, Jefferson County.
Deanna Brangers.
Deanna Brangers, member, Jefferson County.
Sherry Whitehouse.
Member, Bullitt County.
George Russell. You're on mute, George.
Member, Franklin County.
There he is. And we have our other two members who are now, I'm happy to relate, just newly minted voting members. And everybody on the board's very excited about that. First, we have James Lewis. James?
James Lewis, retired county clerk member.
And we have Katrina Fitzgerald.
Katrina Fitzgerald, retired county clerk.
Excellent. We also have with us today members of our staff. We have Jared Deering, our executive director, our assistant deputy executive director, Karen Stellers. We have Taylor Brown, who is legal counsel for the State Board of Elections. And we also have a new member of the staff of the State Board of Elections, and that's Rachel Pointer. Welcome to you, Rachel. Rachel is responsible for the numbers for the State Board. And we have with us our non-voting member who has been absolutely crucial to this process right along, and that is our Secretary of State, Michael Adams.
Thank you. Great to be back.
We have with us also, I think, 3 county clerks that I can see. One is the chair of the County Clerks Association, Renisa Abner. Renisa.
Morning.
We have Don Blevins from Fayette County.
Morning.
And we have Bobby Holzclaw from Jefferson County.
Good morning.
We also have our outside attorneys from the board, represented by Luke Morgan. Good morning.
Morning.
All right.
You missed two.
Dwight.
Who did I miss?
Sherry and Dwight.
No, you got me. I think we missed Dwight.
Oh, Dwight. I did miss Dwight because Dwight had got up from his chair and I skipped him and I didn't come back. And we have, not to ever be forgotten, our member from Pulaski County, Dwight Sears. Good morning, Dwight. Thank you. Also want to let you all know that I've gotten a little notice on my computer here. Of course, we're all at home. We're doing this remotely through Zoom because of our ongoing COVID-19 problem. And I've gotten a notice on my computer that I have an unstable internet connection. So if I suddenly disappear, you all will know why. And if that happens, I'll get back as soon as I possibly can. Let's get into the agenda now. The first item on the agenda is the minutes of our last two meetings, both the special meeting on June 22nd and the meeting that we had on Election Day, June 23rd. Do I have a motion to approve those two sets of minutes?
I'll move to approve those sets of minutes.
A motion by Member Brangers. Do I have a second? Second by Member Whitehouse. All in favor, please say.
Mr.
me.
Chairman, I'm sorry, could I make a suggestion for an edit, please?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that, Mr. Secretary. What do we need to do?
No worries. If you go to the June 22nd teleconference meeting, it's on page 2 of the first board book PDF. You go down to the next to last paragraph. It says Secretary Adams thanked Attorney General and Jared for making these modifications to the administrative regulations. Technically, this board made those changes. I thank the Attorney General and Jared for working with me on drafting the language. If we could just correct that and put the Attorney General's name in there as well. That's all I had.
Any objections to that? Hearing none, that would be fine. Do we have any other corrections or suggested edits?
I'll have the board secretary make those changes.
That'd be good. Thank you.
I will motion that we approve those with the edits from the Secretary of State.
There we go. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Second from Sherry Whitehouse. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we've got the minutes. We've gotten through the minutes. And that's been done successfully. We'll move on to one of the major points of the day, and that is the certification of the election of June 23rd. Before I turn it over to the secretary, I'd just like to say that this was really an unprecedented election in Kentucky. It was a very involved and difficult election to pull off. And I want to take another opportunity to first thank the governor for being willing to make a change in the manner of the election. I want to thank our secretary for working with the governor to make that change. We couldn't have done it without their bipartisan cooperation. And the secretary also, in addition to that, spent enormous amounts of his time working on this election. I'm sure day in and day out, right on through the election. I also want to thank the staff of the State Board of Elections, led by Jared Deering, who finally got to go to sleep on the morning of the 24th, I think. But I don't know that he got any sleep throughout the whole process. And your very capable staff, Jared. The staff was just marvelous throughout the process. And I want to thank the members of the Board of Elections. We had an unusual task that we had to undertake. And what was wonderful about it is that on every single vote that we had, we voted unanimously in a bipartisan fashion to move this thing ahead. And then finally, and certainly, maybe most importantly, I want to thank the county clerks from one end of the state to the other. We have 120 counties in Kentucky. That means 120 elected officials and their staffs, their volunteers, everybody else who worked in those counties in the administration of this election. Quite remarkable what you guys pulled off, what we all pulled off. We had what, by all reports, national reports within this state, a tremendously successful election, one that we had never undertaken before, one that it's taken 8 to 10 years for other states in the country to try to perfect. And we pulled it off in a matter of a couple of months. It was really a remarkable undertaking and a remarkable performance on the part of a whole lot of people. And I know I've forgotten some folks who who were involved. Our vendors, for one, were also very important, and they came through for us. But there were a lot of people involved in this process. It was very successful, and we're all tremendously grateful for the hard work and the teamwork that went into making this a successful election. And with that, Mr. Secretary, we have results, I think, from the election, and I turn it over to you to share those with us so that we can certify those results.
Thank you, Chairman Chandler. Good morning to everybody. If y'all don't mind, I'll give my report now. It'll just take about 30 seconds. I just want to reiterate what Chairman Chandler said about us being a model of bipartisanship. I've been saying this in my national TV interviews since the election. Jared said this too, you saw in the Washington Post story over the weekend. All the things that Kentucky is at the bottom of the heap on in so many areas, this is something that we're number one at. That's pretty special. We showed the world how to run a successful election in a pandemic. I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of our state. And the one thing that I think made us most different from what we've seen in some other states is that we worked in a bipartisan way. We set the rules well in advance. Those rules were clear, and those rules had buy-in from both of the major parties. Otherwise, this wouldn't have worked. I think that's what we did differently. That was an insight that we grasped pretty early on, and from beginning to end, we followed that, and it gave the public confidence in the results. Not just did it smooth the process, but it made the public feel that this was legitimate. And ultimately, that's the most important thing that we have to offer, is a sense of credibility and legitimacy about our elections. So again, thank all of you, and thank our clerks, and thank everyone who made this such a great and nationally celebrated success. I assume that you all have seen the numbers of the election totals. Of course, those numbers were reported to my office via fax by the various county boards of elections over the course of June 30th. We got some a little earlier, we got some a little later, but for the most part, we got those in on June 30th. My staff have painstakingly compared the unofficial results on the State Board of Elections website with the Form 49s, looking for any discrepancies. We only found about 13 votes statewide that were off. Those were provisional ballots that were cast, but not reported to our office initially. We spotted those. This is 13 votes across the state, not in any one place. So we fixed that. So the numbers that you have in front of you are accurate and final. We had 2 recanvasses and a couple of state house race primaries. Both of those came back with not a single vote moved. So these truly are the final results of the historic June 23rd, 2020 primary.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I think it's now the job of the State Board of Elections to certify those results. If everybody has looked at the results and are comfortable that those results are accurate as stated by the Secretary, I would accept a motion to certify the results of the June 23rd primary election in Kentucky.
So moved.
I have a motion by Member Brangers. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Was that Member Fitzgerald?
Yes.
A second by Member Fitzgerald. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Do we have any opposed? The results of the June 23rd primary election are now certified by the Kentucky State Board of Elections. And I want to congratulate the winners, those who had the highest number of votes in that election. Congratulations to all of you, and good luck in November. And speaking of November, we will have more about that shortly. Moving on, our next item of business is the appointments of the County Board of Elections throughout this state. Again, we have, as I mentioned, 120 counties in Kentucky, and those 120 counties each have a County Board of Elections, and the State Board of Elections has to approve the membership of those County Board of Elections. And to explain this, where we are on this, I'll turn it over to you, Jared.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Every year we have new appointments of our county boards of elections. It's an important part of the process to make sure there's continuity at the county side. This is not necessarily something that is the responsibility of the county clerk, but rather responsibility of the parties at the county level. Not every county is as organized at the county level for party participation. Because of that, it takes a little bit of time for us oftentimes to get through these and process and make sure that we have all the correct names in and ready for the board certification on this. We have collected all of the county, as you see in item A. Number 4, item A, pages 6 through 70. All of the Democratic parties in the counties, except for 45 counties, have submitted their names. This is the normal process in which we do, which 5 names are submitted. Per historical reference, we always select the top name on the top of the list to approve. And these are not ratifications. These will be full approval by the board since they are the primary appointment. And then on item B, pages 71 through 178. On the Republican side, we still have 11 counties that are outstanding as well. And we're currently working with those as well. We're trying to work with both the state and county parties to make sure that they have the capacity to be able to submit these names to us in a timely manner. My recommendation, so that these counties that have sent these in appropriately and correctly, that we as a board approve these today. And then next month, I will provide you with the updated list of the 56 counties that are still outstanding and remaining. Are there any questions? All right, Mr. Chairman.
I think we've got one issue, Jared, that I need to go back to just in an abundance of caution.
Sure.
You mentioned that this was the first meeting that our 2 clerk members had that allowed them to have a vote. And my understanding is that that may not actually be the case. I think it would have been the case if we had met at our regular meeting on the 21st of July, but my understanding is that their vote doesn't become official until the 15th, and today's the 13th. I hate to be technical about something like that, but I think we need to at least make sure that that's the case.
Certainly. Taylor, will you verify that? And I apologize if there was any misunderstanding in that.
Yeah, I'll verify that.
Okay, thank you.
Does that mean that what I said was accurate? They don't have the vote until the 15th?
I think that's correct, Ben.
I believe you're correct, Chairman, but I'll double check it.
All right. Well, I'm sorry to James and Katrina because we have been anxious for you all to have the vote and we can't seem to get there. But at least certainly by the next meeting, we'll get there. I guess we're going to have to do the recertification of the election over just again, out of an abundance of caution. I don't think there's any problem with it, but I guess just to have clarity, let's have a motion from a voting member and a second from a voting member.
I'll move that motion again.
Thank you. Motion by Member Brangers. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Whitehouse. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it and the votes are certified. Thank you. Now we move again to the County Board of Elections appointments, and we've got the explanation by Jared. We have a number of counties that are listed in your board books along with the names of the proposed County Board of Elections members. I would propose that we adopt these as a group rather than go through them county by county. That would take an extraordinary amount of time, and I assume that you all have had the opportunity to look over these. I certainly know that staff has been working with the counties and looked over them very carefully. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the counties that are listed in your board book.
I'll make the motion to approve those counties.
It's a motion by Member Brangers to approve the counties in the board book. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion, Mr.
A
Chairman.
second by Member Sears. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Do we have anybody opposed? All right, very good. The county boards of elections of the counties in our books, in our board books are now approved. We still have, according to our board book, 45 Democratic counties outstanding and 11 Republican counties outstanding. So 56 of our 120 counties, we still have to get finalized boards of elections and get them voted on. Hopefully we can get that done by the meeting next month.
We'll continue to work with both the state and local parties to make sure we get that ready for the board by next month.
All right. Jared, the next item on the agenda has to do with the financial reports. Do you want to just very quickly?
Certainly.
I think we're going to move on through this very quickly if possible and take it up at our next regular meeting in some greater detail.
If it's appropriate to the board, I think, Rachel, if you can go over, I think what would be most important is to give the board just a basic understanding where we are with the CARES Act. And now that Rachel's kind of up to speed with the rest of the budget, my hope is that at the next regular board meeting, we'll give a full presentation of all the financial statements and kind of where we are with the full budget for the last several months, and give the board a full accounting of that. But in the interim, unless the board has specific questions, I think it'd be appropriate to speak a little bit about the CARES Act that were spent in this last election, just to give you an update of where we stand with that. Is that okay with the board? Okay. Rachel, if you could kind of just go through briefly kind of a high perspective level of where we were with the CARES Act, what we spent and what we have outstanding.
Okay, so I kind of broke it down to just describe what we've actually expended to this point and then what we have outstanding invoices for. Currently, we have paid invoices for about $3.5 million, and then we have paid about $200,000 in match money. The projection for the remaining invoices and some of the other things that we can count towards CARES Act, I think that's going to leave us for the entire primary, it's going to leave us at about 4.1 million in federal contribution and about 678,000 for match money.
Are there any questions about that?
Can you put that in perspective, Jared?
Yeah, so roughly we were looking at about $7 million in CARES Act funding that came through, both about roughly 6 million for the federal side, $1 million for the state side. Of that, and there's still some outstanding accounts that we're still paying off as they come in, but roughly we have about $2.5 million left over of that. So of the 7 million, we have 2.5 million left over for the upcoming election.
And we have some state match left over too.
Also have some state match left over as well, yes.
How much of that?
400,000, is that correct, Rachel?
Yes.
Roughly.
So we've got about 2.9 million for the general election.
Yes.
This of course is going to be an issue that we're going to have to talk about in great detail and talk about it very quickly, because obviously if the primary cost 4.5 million or whatever it was, the general election is going to be far in excess of that because our turnout's going to be double or more probably of the primary election. And we're going to have to, obviously 2.9 million or whatever we've got is certainly not going to be enough to cover that.
And I think that's part of the reason why I wanted to kind of just give a brief overview of where we were with the CARES Act. So as we start future conversations with what we end up doing in November, that the board is kind of where we stand, and that we can effectively lobby the state side for an increase of funding. And quite frankly, if if the federal side also reappoints another tranche of funding, which my understanding is there's some discussion about, but I don't know that for a fact, obviously, until we have some permanent word. We'll have to rely on the state providing a pretty sizable amount of money for the November election to make sure that we're successful with that.
Well, I know
Can I add
this, excuse me, go ahead, Secretary.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to make a quick point for those watching. I know all the members of the board are aware of this, but we may have the public or media watching. What we're talking about with these costs, these are additional costs. That's not to say that we only spent $4.5 million to run this election. It was a heck of a lot more expensive than that. These are extra costs that are due to the pandemic, the costs of staffing up our clerk's offices, of getting PPE, of paying for printing for absentee ballots, paying for postage for absentee ballots, paying for drop boxes and so forth. The state and the feds didn't together subsidize the entirety of the cost of the election. We still have our regular costs that are borne primarily at the county level. What we're talking about here are the extra costs even beyond those costs. So this was a very, very expensive election, even more expensive than the numbers we're throwing around, because those are just the extra costs.
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for pointing that out. And it is, and I will say, just to kind of give a little bit of breakdown of what that looks like, we're talking about roughly $1.3 million in mail costs for postage related expenses from the counties. We're talking several $100,000 for the purchase of the drop boxes. There's almost $100,000 in overtime just for the state IT staff to make sure that the portal was up and running. We had staff that were putting in 75+ hour weeks in the weeks leading up to the election. And obviously our contractors are a pretty sizable amount of that money that comes in for overtime for that. But all of those things went into creating, these excess costs that we would not normally see under an election process. And the CARES Act funds were pivotal to making sure we have that success. To Secretary Adams' point, it is definitely not the total sum of all the money that we spent for this election, and definitely not at the county level as well, which the county will bear a very sizable portion of that allotment.
Did we offset any expenses, Jared?
Well, so, I mean, offset in the sense of what the last election was, not really. I know the counties on the county side, one of the things that we had expected was that we'd have a decreased amount of payment for poll workers. However, we still required the counties to pay for postage to the voter. The state paid for the postage back from the voter to the county clerk, but the clerks were still responsible in that payment out. And for most counties, that amount that they saved on the poll worker side and not having to pay for the training and the working day on election day for their poll workers, that was definitely recouped by the amount of money they had to pay for postage out. And most counties actually probably had to pay a little bit extra on top of that. We did spend roughly $1 million. And this is something I forgot to mention as well during what we were talking about CARES Act funding, but the board approved $1 million in spending roughly to the counties to provide extra staffing. And I know that was extremely helpful for many of the counties, and in some circumstances made sure it was the difference of how many staff they had on board to make sure this job got done. So that was $1 million on top of that. But as far as savings, not really. But I will say that in the upcoming election, there were some things that we purchased in the last election that we won't have to repurchase. They won't be one-off purchases, but we will definitely see, the need to purchase a lot of these things over again in the November election. If we have the continuation of the drop boxes, that's something we can reuse again. I don't know if we would need to purchase more, but it's very minimum. We have, every county basically has some drop boxes they can utilize. The equipment that we purchased, and I will say this is probably something that's been underreported at the state level, but we were able to bring up every single county to be a voter verified paper audit trail system. I know it's something that's been important to the board and for a lot of security purposes to make sure that there is an audible, accountable process for every single ballot that's cast in the state. And every county we were able to bring up to be VVPAT compliant with that. There are still some counties that are using DREs as their ADA compliant systems. But for the counties that we used for those, we purchased enough for them to be able to handle their early in-person and a reduced number of polling locations on election day. So moving into November, we might need to take a look at that if that's something we want to continue to make sure that they have that continuation of those updated systems. So again, while there were some things that were not one-off purchases, but we can continue to utilize moving forward, there will still also be a lot of things that we'll need to purchase over again.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about that plenty as we move on down the road on talking about the general election. Does anybody else have any questions about the CARES Act or the financial situation at the moment? All right, hearing none, I want to move on to Secretary Adams. You're next on the agenda, and anything else that you have to report, please, now's your time.
No, sir, I'm all good. I had my say earlier, and I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and you'll have, I'm sure, plenty of other opportunities to have more say. With that, Jared, do you have anything else?
The only thing I would bring up is one, I know one of the members had asked about a report of absentee ballots and kind of how that accounting process worked on the backside, ballots that were counted and ballots that were not counted, reasons why they were not counted. We are still in the process of collecting what we call the 33 SBE forms from the county side. A good portion of the counties have returned those to us, but we're still short a couple of them. And then the ones that we do have, we're aggregating that data to be able to effectively give you a report so you can understand. But I will say for the first time in our state's history, we had a signature cure process, which means that if a voter's signature did not match the one that was on record, and just for reference, we used driver's license signatures as well as registration card signatures to match those. But for the first time in our state's history, if a signature didn't match, that voter was contacted and they were notified and given a way to be able to cure that signature so that their ballot was counted. We still have other statutorial reasons why ballots were not counted, including voters who ripped the flap off, the security flap of the inner envelope, who didn't sign both envelopes, voters who didn't put the ballot in the actual envelope and mailed it back. There are a multitude of reasons why, but we can give a fairly significant overview that by hopefully the next board meeting, I'll be able to give you a full presentation of what that looks like and where we're at with that. The only other thing of note, and we can go into more detail next election, but our next board meeting, but I was able to testify in front of the United States Election Assistance Commission last week. I thought it was a very productive meeting. The EAC kind of wanted to hear lessons learned. Secretary Paul Pate from Iowa, myself, and then several local elections directors from across the country were able to discuss what their elections looked like. And to Secretary Adams' point, I was highly, I guess, my biggest takeaway from the election was the bipartisan effort that was made by both the secretary and the governor, as well as this board and our local boards as well. I thought that was an incredible learned process for that last election, and I thought it was important to highlight that as we move forward. So I think we may have, I think Ben's, our Chairman Chandler's feed may have dropped. Let me have Alan put him back in. I think the meeting's locked. Give me 1 second, everyone. I apologize. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I think Chairman Chandler should be in now.
Yes, I'm back.
I apologize.
No, it's my problem, my fault. My computer just quit on me.
It's okay. So in conclusion, though, the EAC testimony was well received, and we had some good prep from that as well that discussed the efforts of the secretary and the governor and the board in making sure that the election was successful. So it was a good opportunity to highlight and showcase some of the good work that was done in the Commonwealth this last election. So, but that's it for me.
Chairman?
All right. Do we have any comments on that?
George, I think you're on mute. Member Russell, oh, there you go.
Am I off?
We can't hear you very well.
Okay, I don't know what is wrong.
We can hear you just a little bit, though. You might want to speak up just a little bit, Member Russell.
Okay, I have one question for you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, there was a large amount of ballots received late. I cannot believe people would have returned ballots in after election day. Do you have any idea on why they were received late?
When you say received late, are you saying received by the voter or received by the clerk after election day?
By the clerk.
So what we've been told by other states was that we could expect to see as much as 60% of the volume of returned mail to be returned between the day before the election, the day of the election, and then the 2 days following the election. That tends to be if the cutoff date to be arrived at the county clerk's office is on election day, that's one thing. But in the states where the deadline is only that the voter have a postmark on it by the 23rd, what most of those states have told us is that the bulk of that mail will actually arrive roughly on or after election day. For whatever reason, voters will procrastinate. They'll wait until the last day, but they usually ship those in either the day before the election or on election day itself. We did see a fairly significant number of ballots that were arriving at the county clerk's office with date stamps of the 23rd on them. So I don't know if that would necessarily, George, I know it's out of the norm of our normal process because we usually have the ballots are returned prior to election day or up to election day, but it doesn't seem as if this was outside the norm of national trends.
I think we need to look and see if the post office has been a problem and some of those ballots received come in late to the county clerk's office. Because I looked at Franklin County, I looked at Fayette County, I looked at Jefferson County, and all three counties I thought had an unusual large amount of ballots coming in late.
Yeah, I mean, they were still counted though. I mean, that's the takeaway from that though, is that they.
No, I was looking at the one the reasons why they were not counted.
Oh, so you're saying that these were ones that were either delivered after the 27th or.
Correct.
Okay. We'll have to go back again. That'll be something that'll bear out when we look at the total numbers. Now, I think it's important to understand that when percentage wise, when we're looking at these things, so for instance, when you look at Jefferson County, I believe they had 4.5% of their ballots were rejected because of fault for the ballot itself. Now, in a scale, because we had so much more volume of mail that was returned to us, that it looks like a large volume, but by percentage, that actually is lower than what Jefferson has been in the past for absentee ballots.
I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm not criticizing anyone.
Oh, no, I didn't take it that way. What I'm saying is that I think because this is a brand new process, I think some of these numbers look one way, but the reality is when you look at them by percentage, it looks like the election that this was no greater than any other we've had prior to that, including looking at Jefferson, which they were under their normal percentages for ballots rejected. But George, to your point, I think I'll have to take a deeper look at that. But by percentage, I don't think it was anything that was out of the norm.
Okay. Second question, voter credit. Now, when the ballot came in, it was scanned. Does that automatically give voter credit?
So we have to tag that in the system first. So while yes, the scanning mechanism will make sure that the voter receives credit, we still have to flip that flag inside the voter registration system. We're also still processing the e-poll books and the data that will come with that to make sure that anyone who's signed in on election day or early voting, that they'll receive voter credit. And we also still have to process by hand all the supplemental rosters. So that the bulk of the time that it will take us to make sure that voter credits given to the entire state will still be contingent on having to hand enter in all of those supplemental rosters.
Okay, thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions? Hearing none, let's move on to the county clerks. We have 3 county clerks with us today. I guess I'll turn first to the president of the association, Renisa Abner.
Good morning. Thanks for having us today. I just wanted to say first off, thanks. I'm echoing statements that have been made before, but thank you so much for all your support and your hard work. State Board of Elections, Secretary of State. I mean, every office worked together so well, and the county clerks know that this is a successful election that we just came out of. We're a little shell shocked, I will say. It was a lot of work, but we appreciate all your efforts for everyone that was involved, and we know you guys worked as hard as we did, and we just appreciated the collaborative effort to make it a success. So I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about like this election and then moving forward. And I don't want to take up a whole lot of time because I know we have Don Blevins and also Bobby Holzclaw who are going to speak. So I just kind of wanted to just kind of make a general statement that every county is different. Every county clerk's office is different. Some counties, we have new courthouses, some don't. Some have large staffs, others have 1 or 2. Some have drive-throughs. A lot of us don't. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of situation with elections, and that kind of makes it hard for, I know, whenever you're trying to regulate and make things to govern it. But just make sure that we keep the flexibility involved, because that's going to make it key to make it successful in every location for what you implement in the general as well as in the primary. So I just want to kind of to put that into perspective for everybody, because we're all not the same, and it's just hard to have, hard and fast. This is how we're going to do it for every county. In Henderson, our voter turnout for the primary was 25%. 72% of my voters voted mail-in, and 27% took advantage of the in-person on election day and early. But I know in other counties, it was more evenly split between the in-person and the mail option. So I know it was all over the place, the statistics as far as the methods used in each county. So I can't say that the KCCA recommends one method or another. And we all have different experiences and opinions about how the primary went. But I can tell you that some of the things worked really well. And then we just have some things that we need to improve on. The portal was hugely successful. A lot of people took advantage of that, and the voters seem to like it a lot. The only one thing that we really had an issue with was that whenever the clerks were helping the voters with the portal, we wanted a way to click to show that we were helping the voter. I know there's only one option there that says you are the voter and you are, applying. But in some cases, especially people who didn't have internet access or, needed help with, applying, there was nothing for us to click on to show that that's, we were assisting the voter. So that would be, something that we could improve on. And we also, the people that, really enjoyed the early voting, maybe we could have that for longer if we're going to do that. allow for a longer time period for the voters to use that. So the postcards, they were helpful, but we would like the ability to make those more personalized for the county level, just to get the information out to the voter if possible. I know time was our enemy on this one, this past in the primary. And I know a lot of things couldn't be implemented that would have been helpful. And we, did what we could. But for the general, I think it would be helpful if the voter had, more county specific information on that postcard. We had a little bit of trouble with the labels that were generated from the portal. And we just need to coordinate the State Board of Election, the election vendors, 10X, our e-poll, vendor, so that the voter information looks the same through every platform that we have to deal with. So we're dealing with many different ballot faces in different counties. And it just makes it a lot more difficult when that information looks different on each different platform that we work with. Allow for more drop boxes, especially the larger counties. They need more spots available for voters to be able to drop those off for it to work as well, because, it's going to be twice as large this election. So the voters need more ways in order to deliver those ballots to us. And we need that state funding. I know you just spoke about that, Jared, about, we don't have as much funding for this upcoming election, but I can tell you for me personally, it was crucial. Those 4 people that the state funding allowed me to hire, if I wouldn't have had those people, I wouldn't have been able to produce all of those ballots that we mailed out. They were the key. They did that all day long. I had a supervisor in my office that saw that whole operation, and all day long they did that. And it wouldn't have, I would not have had the staff to do that. And also we were closed. My office was closed to the public due to the pandemic. And, a lot of my staff, they focused on election related duties. And now most of us, I think, are open. So that's even more critical, that funding for those extra workers. That's what made it successful for me personally. And I know I've heard a lot of county clerks tell me that, they couldn't have done it without the extra funding and the staff they were able to hire. And also we were wondering too, and it may not be a possibility, but a call center to handle some of the calls. We had a tremendous amount of calls. We spent so much time on the phone actually talking to voters about the process and how to use the portal, and just things that maybe, maybe if there was some funding for a small call center to maybe handle some of those more general questions that, take the time away from our staff and focusing on election, if that's a possibility. But overall, I think it was a good experience for most of the county clerks. Once we got everything situated and everything kind of lined out what we were going to do, it was successful. And we just have to work on it a little bit more for the general, and hopefully get an answer really quickly, because we think we have a little bit more time, but really we don't. I know, the supplies that you all have to order, the state board have to order, you have those deadlines are right now. We have to find all of the places that, all of our polling locations, if we're going to expand those any at all. So we need a decision as quickly as we can. And we also need the same guidelines for all the county clerks as far as counting the ballots. That was a little bit of an issue as well. If there's no signature on the ballot, everyone needs to, handle that the same. So we just had a few little things that we need to work out. But for the most part, it was a success. And I just wanted to thank everybody again. And I don't know if Dawn, or Mr. Chandler, if you would like to.
Well, Renee, thank you very much. Lots of things to talk about, as you mentioned, and lots of decisions to be made. And what I hope to do is impanel a small working group, just like we did last time, I hope to get that done today so that we can get down to detail of working out some problems and, even more importantly, making a decision about what the general election is going to look like. Because right now, if we stay the way we are right now, we'll have a normal election in November with a one election day and the voting taking place from 6 to 6. So a number of things have to happen. The governor and the secretary of state have to get together and decide whether they want. First, the governor has to declare an emergency. We want to have a change in the manner of election based on that emergency. Number of things are going to happen, and I'd like to impanel the work to talk about all of those things sooner rather than later. And what we really need to understand, I think, today as quickly as we can are the timelines. How quickly we need to get this thing decided and moving in order to have a chance at having a successful election in the general. With that, I'll turn to, I guess, either Clerk Blevins or Clerk Holsclaw, whoever prefers to go first.
I will defer to the mighty county of Jefferson and let her go first.
Clerk Holsclaw, are you there?
We'll try to hang on. We're going to see if we can't get her off of mute real quick. Hang on 1 second.
Hello?
Clerk Holsclaw, is that you?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And we've now come to you for your comments.
Okay. Where does one begin? Let me say too that I know everyone has been thanked, and I don't think anybody does it for a reason to be being thanked for, but I do want to tell you all that one of your members, Deanna Brangers, was absolutely wonderful here in Jefferson County in a very bipartisan manner too. Her knowledge and her willingness to get in the trenches was absolutely amazing. And I know I thanked Deanna, but I want to say it again so everyone knows the type of player she is. Then, of course, Jared was wonderful to us. I know he gave it his all. I don't really know how he stood all the pressure because we were a pressure enough just by ourselves. Anyway, I thank both of you all. I thank everyone who helped because it truly was a team effort. Let me go across. I know Renessa touched on most things, but I will give you kind of where we are. The portal was really easy to use, and the work was produced much faster than having to send out the paper application. The labels had a couple of small issues, but they can be worked out. It greatly improved the process of sending out those ballots. I will tell you this, and I'm sure everybody will tell you, that if you are going to do this in November, that portal will have to be implemented much earlier than it was in the primary. And another thing, I like the idea that it allowed any voter to apply for a mail-in ballot. I think the voter liked that. Now, the few cons that we have, there is no way in Jefferson could we do this in November. And I say that because we don't have the people to do it. I have a staff of close to 300, and I know that's more than most people have, but you have to understand, we're talking about several 100,000 ballots. The only way we were able to do it was simply because we closed all of the branches, shut them down, and pulled all of those employees over to the election center. And even at that, they worked double shifts, 6 to 6 and 6 to 6. These offices were never staffed for something like this. They just were never staffed for that, and I understand it. We've never had an experience like that. They weren't staffed for people, nor were they certainly weren't financially ready to do that. We're way in the hole with money, of course, and when you shut down the branches, there is no income from all of the motor vehicle and legal records. So it's mighty hard to make a payroll. You know, we shut down 8 branches, and you know, there's repercussions from that. You know, we're suffering today from the lines because they're shutting those branches down, and people complain about that. As much as I want to, and believe me, I'm going to be a team player, and whatever is decided, somehow, some way, we're going to do it. I personally prefer to go back to the old way, and not that that's necessarily doesn't bring its problems, because it does, as you well know, with the poll workers. But I think the poll workers, if we have enough time to know, we can do our very, very best to round those up. People that have complained about, oh, well, I'll be a poll worker, I'll be a poll worker, I'll get poll workers. That may be true, but they don't even know that it has to be a bipartisan group of people with those poll workers. And so we train about 2,500 poll workers. And you just can't send all Republicans in or all Democrats in. Those have to be spaced. And I know they probably won't like it, but the parties have never, at least in Jefferson, been able to fill those slots. So we've gone to private sectors, we've gone to the colleges, we've gone to a lot of places to try to recruit poll workers. But with the amount of money, I guess they're not interested. When at first we've increased it with the training and the election day up to $40 for the training, and then $160 for election day. And maybe if that was increased, maybe that will entice them. Of course, you're always going to have, and I can truly understand the older generation is so fearful of this flu. Okay, now, for my county, again, there are going to be way over 1,000 different ballot styles because of all the small cities. And we have no guarantee whatsoever that we can get back that Fair and Exposition Center, which is really the only place in Louisville that can accommodate that. It was absolutely wonderful, and I certainly thank the people that allowed us to have it there. There was never a person that had to wait. And I can't tell you the planning that went into that, and I thank my own staff for that. They did an unbelievable job. Here again, you have to have enough space, large enough for in-person voting. And also, besides that, the mayor has moved us out of one building and we're going to another one. But we're going to need another place besides this one in order to process those ballots. So, you know, the logistics and all this can become very hard for our county. And you need a very large place for in-person voting. And one, of course, we had people working in 3 different offices day and night. So all of that has to come in. As far as the cost, we are going to have to purchase more ballotars. We're going to have a letter open machine, voting machines, scanners, envelopes. And of course, like I said earlier, election officers will still be a challenge, but I have to tell you, I would rather have that challenge than what we went through. Because while I feel like we did a great job, I can't even begin to tell anybody the work that was put into that. One thing that I would like to say, though, is, and I know you all do what you all have to do, and I understand there's reasoning behind everything, but we just need a little more consistency in the responses on the policy and procedures of the different scenarios. That would be really helpful too. But other than that, it was truly a team effort on everybody's part. I'm thankful and grateful that I got to be a part of it, even though there were nights I thought, why am I doing this? But it was a part of history, and to be allowed to be a part of that, I'm very proud of. I'm proud to work with all of you all. You've all been very good to me, and I know everybody's intention is to do the right thing by everybody. I wouldn't want your job. I think it's impossible to really please everybody. And I really don't have anything else. I just hope that as Renisa said, all these counties are different, and all of them are as important as one as another. And the way we operate, it would just be, you just can't judge one county from another. And, I hear a lot, well, Jefferson has all these employees. Jefferson doesn't have the kind of employees that it takes to do something like this in the general election, particularly when those branches are open now. I can't close those branches again. And I mean, they were closed. I want you to think about that. They were closed for weeks, months. And in order to do it, if those things are open, there's no way that I have any kind of staff that could do this. The election staff certainly couldn't do it. They're capable of mentally doing it, but physically they don't have the staff to do it. And, we have to go before Metro Council, and they have to allot some of this money for elections too. I don't know where they're going to stand on all this. So with that being said, I thank everybody. I thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak today. Again, Deanna, you've been wonderful to me, and I can't thank you enough. And Jared, you certainly earned your money and more. Thank you all.
Thank you, Clerk Holsclaw. Obviously, you point out a lot of reasons why this is an incredibly complicated subject. Not only is the running of the election incredibly complicated, but so is the decision that the governor and the Secretary of State are going to have to make. And what complicates it even further is a very, very tight timeline. But we'll be talking about it considerably more in the future.
That's fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Clerk Blevins, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again and listening. Good to see everybody. I will try to keep my remarks brief as well. I'll just say ditto to Renisa and to Clerk Holtzclaw. By the way, my hat's off to you, Bobby. You had by far the most difficult election to run this time, and by all accounts, you all crushed it in Jefferson. I'm so impressed and proud of you and us as a state. That was incredible what you pulled off. I want to take a slight different look at what we just went through. I think we've covered all the little, we were successful with the election, very successful. There were some problems that we can correct, having learned from them. I've been saying on local radio, for example, the old joke about a pilot saying, any landing that you walk away from is a good landing. Well, any election you walk away from where everybody was counted and corrected and all that is a good election. And that's exactly what we just did. But let's look at it from the angle of why we had to do it. And that is the COVID-19 virus outbreak. If you go back and look at our moving averages for new positive cases, as well as the positive percentage of cases, after June 23rd, for those 2 weeks post-election, we stayed flat just like we're supposed to. So the other way that this election was a success is that we saved lives. That was my #1 marching order that I took from the governor and the Secretary of State. Go out there, get an election done, but do it in a way that saves lives. And we were successful, you guys. That's incredible. Only since July 4th are we starting to see our increases in cases. And we all know that that has to do with bars reopening and folks relaxing a little bit with their families and friends. That's not on the elections. That's just on the public at large. So way to go us for delivering an election under the most unique circumstances and doing it in a way that saves lives. Looking towards November, I'm thrilled to hear the chairman say he wants to put together a task force that will include some clerks. We definitely need to give you all input on what we do in the fall, and then also on the details of how we go about doing it. The emergency regulation was pretty good for this past round, but there was some language that was a little restrictive. Had we had a chance to tweak, it might have made things a little easier. So those kinds of things are the devil in the details that we'll all want to use in the fall. I want to echo what Renisa said about flexibility. One size does not fit all in this situation. I'll pick on Jason Denny in Anderson County. He's the only county that I'm aware of. There might be one other that actually has a drive-through window in his office. Well, he made great use of that, and it's perfect for the situation we have here. So any solution that we want to try to do in the fall would need to allow the flexibility for Jason to make use of that drive-through window. Similarly, drop boxes, I couldn't do it at my office because of the restrictive language. So we really couldn't do it that way. But in the fall, if we're going to do a lot more mail-in ballots, we need to really look at having distributed network of drop boxes. I believe Colorado, Boulder, for example, is about the same size as Lexington. They had 4 or 5 boxes. There's these beautiful steel things that you can buy. And that's what I would favor, just to help a little bit of the post office issues that we've already discussed. So that's just an example of, if we can work together and collaborate, I think we can do something in the fall that will both be safe, but also doable. Now I want to really talk about the toughest part of the problem, that is resources and time and money. So whenever you do a project, you can adjust either the project scope, you can adjust the duration you take to do it. Everybody knows this: time, scope, and money, or you can adjust the resources. Well, the scope of what we have to do in November is to deliver an election. That's not going to change. In terms of the time, it's already set. It's going to be in November, and that's the end of, you can't adjust the time. The only thing we can do on time is make a decision rapidly on what we're going to do so that we can all start executing that plan. I would ask also, I would echo what everybody else has said and ask that the Secretary of State and Governor begin work now, and hopefully have at least a generic decision by the end of this month that we can all start working towards. We don't have to have final, emergency regulation language or anything like that. But if we all know the general direction we're headed, that allows me to start making those plans, as well as every other clerk in the state. I don't know if I can pull off doing a full mail-in thing like we did in the primary. I think I can, but if I'm going to do that, it's going to require renting a fairly large facility. I need to go do that right now and start networking it and all the other crazy stuff we'll have to do to build basically a central ballot processing facility from scratch. I can't do that in 6 weeks. So if we're going to do expanded mail again, we need to start now. Likewise, though, if we're going to do a normal election, we need to know that today for all the reasons that Bobby said. We've got to go recruit those officers. It's going to be a lot more difficult than some people are making it sound like in the public, for all the reasons that Bobby said. I want to add one other little problem that we haven't really talked about, and that's locations. I can imagine, I heavily rely on churches in Fayette County, for example, and I can imagine some churches being very uncomfortable with having crowds of people coming into their buildings under the COVID crisis. So we may actually have challenges with churches. I know for a fact that in several counties that the school systems are balking at having voting locations in them. Even though there's a statute that requires them to allow us to use them, they're pushing back. And so we may have issues there as well. So know that no matter what course we take, it's going to be a challenge no matter which way we go. But one thing we can alleviate is the pressure of time by going ahead and making a decision and then going there. Now let's talk about resources. Money is a huge issue. Renisa and everybody's already talked about that. Let me make a couple other points. The small county fiscal courts were challenged financially before this crisis hit. I want you to remember that. Particularly the coal severance counties were really hurting, some in danger of going bankrupt, believe it or not. When the crisis hit, that's only gotten worse. In addition, county clerk offices are way behind in our revenue collections, just like every other aspect of government. For example, I'm $500,000 net behind just in my motor vehicle area. So that's a very real, tangible problem that we're not only facing a crisis with the virus, we're all worried about making payroll as well. That's a challenge. But let's talk about expertise. And I think this is what Clerk Holskall was trying to get at. We used all of our employees to pull off that primary. We can't do it in the fall. We will have to hire outside help to do that. Particularly for shipping out ballots and receiving them back in if we go with an expanded mail again. Well, there's only so many people in Fayette and Jefferson or Kenton that know how to run an election at the local level. In my case, I have 7 employees in the election department. One of them is retiring at the end of this month. So I'm now down to 6 people in Fayette County that actually know how to do this. I can't have them manage hundreds of people. That's just unwieldy, and things will get out of control. We'll make lots of mistakes or have problems. So there's a real resource challenge. And I say that because there's going to be a temptation for the public to push us towards, we want both mail, expanded mail, and we want to be able to vote in person wherever we used to vote. We can't do that. We can't have both. First of all, we don't have the money for it. And second of all, I can't spread my expertise that far. It's pretty much going to have to be one or the other with slight variations on a theme. So I'm just putting out boundaries for our decision making here, that it's not going to be easy no matter what we do. Finally, I just throw out a number for people to be thinking about. Fayette's largest turnout in the last 20 years was 72% in 2008, highly anticipated election. I think this one will easily beat that for planning purposes for a lot of reasons, and I'm happy to explain this in another setting. I'm planning for 85% turnout this fall. So that'll give you some numbers to work with. I think I'll stop there, Chair, and if there's questions, happy to help with those. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Well, thank you, Don. Appreciate again everything that you guys have done, and I know it's obviously been so unique and a very, very difficult election to get through, and you did very, very well. What the comments that I'm hearing from the clerks all are basically one theme, and that is we've got to make a decision very, very quickly, and you can tell that the decision is going to be very difficult. So that's a wonderful thing, to have a very difficult and complicated decision and have to make it quickly. And Mr. Secretary, I'm looking at you. I know you're going to be excited that the buck stops with you and the governor. Would you like to comment?
I would. Those comments from all the clerks are really helpful to me. I want to reassure everybody, I get it. I understand that we need to move promptly. In fact, my conversations with the governor on this issue have already begun. Certainly, they're very preliminary at this point because I want to have, and I want him to have, the benefit of conversations like these. I want to do a deep dive with Jared on all the various facets of this past election. I want to get input from all the county clerks that I can, rural and urban, Democrat and Republican. I want to get certainly input from this board. I want to get as many voices as I can get before I make a recommendation, and I'm sure the governor feels the same way. So we're not going to sit on our hands. We're going to move as expeditiously as we can, but to make a good decision, we need information. And so that's going to be our focus the next few weeks, getting that information.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda was to discuss what we're going to do in the November election. And I guess we could just carry on with this conversation and move right into that. We've had quite a bit of discussion already. Does any other member have anything they want to say about what they think we ought to be doing in terms of getting ready for the election in November?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to see a top 3 to 5 things that worked per county, because as Renisa and Don and Bobby all three said, you know, it's not a one size fits all, but if we could get a top 3 things that worked, a top 3 to 5 things that maybe didn't work, and then maybe 3 to 5 things that would be on a wish list. And then that would give us some true data per county. Then we could come back and the committee that you're going to assign possibly today could reevaluate and look at each county, because again, the DNA per county is different. And I understand that.
Well, I think certainly Jared will be involved in trying to put together those very things, the sort of the pros and the cons and the places where we have difficulties, the things that really went well and so forth. But that's very good point. Anybody else?
Chairman
James?
Chandler.
Yes, James Lewis.
Yes. I think it's evident from what we've heard today and over the last few weeks that the November election is an entirely different ball game than what the primary is. And the problems that I think have been identified here today will have to lead us into how the November election will be conducted. The resources being a tremendous obstacle, I think, in certain directions. So it has to be a complete package. Whatever method is chosen has to be fully funded, or it will be a disaster for the state. we've been able over the last several years under certainly no conditions like this, but to be a leader in the election process in the United States. Kentucky has. Our system, I think, was designed and has been designed to make our voting process doable under most circumstances. And so I know there's a lot of things that's going to have to be considered in this process, and there will have to be way-offs, I think, in the decision. So hopefully everyone can present their ideas, make their arguments, and hopefully a wise decision will come out of this that will make the election a success and not a problem.
Thank you, James. Anybody else? All right, hearing nothing, I will go ahead and suggest to you all that I think it's a good idea to appoint a work group. I did that last time leading up to the primary, and that work group was really the one that came up with the way that the primary was conducted, the manner that the secretary looked at, and the secretary, of course, was very much involved in the work group, was a member of the work group, and we put together a consensus suggestion that was put to the governor, and it led to the election that we just had. I would propose that we do that again, and that we try to do it as quickly as possible, understanding that I think the thing that we need to really do is get this thing moving very, very quickly. And now, as I think Clerk Blevins said, we've got a situation where we've got higher number of COVID cases in the last week than we had previously. And frankly, looking toward November, we've got a coinciding of the COVID situation with the flu season. And we don't know what that's going to portend in November. So not only does the decision have to be made in terms of how to run the election, but a decision has to be made with somebody who's, I mean, the governor and the secretary have got to be able to see into the future, I think, and try to understand what November is going to be like. But really, they don't have that luxury. They've got to decide sooner because of all of the logistical problems that have to be dealt with on the front end. And with that being said, I'd like to appoint a group. Certainly, Mr. Secretary, you would be a part of it. I'd like to put a couple of board members on it and a couple of county clerks on it. And I would like to ask the board for authority to do that immediately for the general election. And with that, I would ask for a motion to that effect.
Motion.
That's a motion from Member Whitehouse. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Sears. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Very good. I will get that done in consultation with Jared and some of the board members, but hopefully we will move forward. The board, the secretary, and the county clerks together will try to come up with a sensible solution that works as best as possible for everybody involved. And we understand, as been pointed out, how difficult that's going to be. It's a very, very complicated situation. There's no question that the general, as James said, is a different animal from the primary. It's going to be over twice the turnout. There's no question about that. And we've just got a lot of issues that we've got to discuss. Work group will discuss them, and we will try to turn it around just as quickly as we possibly can. If there are no other discussions about that, we will need to move into executive session at this time. We've got a number of lawsuits that we're dealing with, some having to do with the general election itself. But we need to do that in executive session. So I would entertain a motion from anybody to move into executive session.
Member Chandler,
Yes, sir.
would you mind if Renisa stayed for the first part of the closed session for the security briefing?
I don't mind if everybody else is all right with that.
It should only take a few minutes.
Suits me. Can I have a motion to go into executive session?
Motion.
Motion by member Whitehouse, second. Did we get a second?
I seconded it.
Second by member Brangers. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we will now go into executive session, and I would like the public to know that as soon as we return from executive session, we'll move back into public session. I don't think there's much else on the agenda beyond this, but if there is, we will discuss those. If anybody else has anything, we'll discuss that at that time. And if everybody could, if you all could prepare us for executive session, that'd be great.
All right, 1 second. If everyone can hold their conversation